Hey everyone, welcome back to Portal of Wisdom. I am back today with another story for you. So if you are new to the channel, like and subscribe and click that little post notification bell if you like lost gold and lost treasure stories. And next up, we have a great story that comes to us all the way from down under. Yes, down under as in Australia. I don't think we've ever done an Aussie story before, and this one is fun and it's crazy all the way to the end. So listen until the end so you get all the crazy facts and details and twists and turns. This story has taken on a life of its own and it's grown to mythical proportions in Aussie folklore, similar to how the Lost Dutchman's lost gold mine in Arizona has become bigger than life in the western U.S. So the Aussie story centers around Harold Lasseter, an Australian man born September 27th, 1880 in Victoria, Australia. So he is well known for discovering and then losing and trying to relocate a very rich gold reef or gold vein in 1897 in the Australian outback. So this gold reef would be more massive than just about any gold discovery in the world if it were able to be found, at least according to the details of Lasseter. So Harold, or Harry as he was also known, was a very intriguing and interesting man, but he was also said to be a very mysterious and eccentric character too. So his lost gold reef is well known in Australia as Lasseter's Reef. So the story of his discovery plays out like this. He had said that at the age of 17, in the year of 1897, he was riding his horse from Queensland, Australia, in the northeast part of the country, to the Western Australian gold fields. And along the way, somewhere in central Australia, he discovered a thick reef of very rich gold in some massive veins of quartz. All of the Australian sources call it a gold reef, whereas in the US we may call it a rich gold vein. Now, I've seen some videos of some of these huge fields of quartz, and it's beyond belief the amount of quartz, not just in the mountains, but huge chunks of quartz that are spread across the landscape as far as the eye can see in every direction, and it appears they've broken off of the quartz veins in the mountains that can be super thick. So it's so much quartz in some areas that it's just near impossible to imagine how you could even check out all of the quartz in these areas to see if it was gold bearing. But now back to the story of Harry. He said at the time of his discovery he was having difficulty, but he did not state exactly which kind of difficulty he was having. Maybe his horse was wearing out, or he was not finding adequate water, or something else may have been going on. Either way, it seems that he hopped off of his horse and he was likely looking a little closer at the ground, or quite possibly surveying the landscape and trying to find water or something else of importance at that point. This was when he said he discovered the rich vein or reef of quartz in the area with the gold in it. And it was supposedly a huge outcropping on the side of a mountain, and huge chunks of quartz had fallen off of the mountain, and there were gold-laden pieces of quartz everywhere. So it was said to be a massive amount of gold. So he was having difficulty when he discovered this gold reef, but he picked up a sample of the gold for proof. And he said at this point he was saved by an Afghan camel driver that happened to be making his way through the area at some point after Harry was stranded there for a while. So Harry said the area was vast, the unexplored desert wilderness, and he likely would not have made it out of there alive if not for this camel driver that had helped him. So it seems he apparently hitched a ride with him and made it back to civilization. He also said that direction and orientation in the gold laden area was extremely difficult. So it seems that maybe he was trying to say that he was hopelessly lost without saying that he was lost when he found this gold reef, but that kind of occurred to me with his details of how difficult the directions were in this area. So Harry was quoted as saying about the gold in this area that it was, quote, thick as plums in a pudding, end quote. And he guessed that the gold was worth 60 million pounds at that time. I don't know how a 17-year-old would know how to value the gold discovery, but apparently the discovery was massive. Now, it seems that Harry took a good piece of gold-laden quartz with a decent amount of gold in it as proof of what he had found, but he apparently said nothing to the Afghan camel driver, or anyone else for that matter, until around 1929, when he was nearing the age of 50. But there could be a good reason for this. It seems that Harry was in and out of the service for many stints, likely shortly after his discovery. Not too much is known about his life except that it is said that he was literate, he was well spoken, and at some point he got married and he had 5 children. It was said that he was just discharged from the military for going AWOL, or absent without leave. This means you left your military duty or post or assignment and you disappeared without approval from your superiors. So this may have happened more than once depending on the source that I found. It may have happened a couple of times. So when he went AWOL, was he heading out to try his luck at relocating this gold reef? Who knows what the reasons were for him going AWOL at that point. It is noted that he was in the service during World War I, and one of the main pictures you tend to see of Harry is of him taken in 1915 in his military uniform. So another source stated that he spent some time in a hospital in 1917, but it did not mention if it was from a war injury or what the case was. But of course, 1917 would be during World War I. I believe that went from 1914 to 1918. Apparently, after the service, Harry Lasseter dabbled in a lot of different professions, and this may have been the point that he got married and had children, and possibly the pressure of raising a family and having him thinking about this gold that he had found at one point and what it could do for his family and how that might work out well for him if he were able to relocate it again. So I'm sure these things may have been on his mind at this point. Now, we should probably discuss the sheer size of the outback in Australia for reference, and maybe give a comparison to the US so people totally get it. The US is about 3.8 million square miles, and the Australian outback is about 2.2 million square miles. So the outback itself is about the size of half of the US, or maybe a little more than half of the US. The outback actually covers 70% of the Australian continent, and it only has about 3% of the Australian population living in this deserty outback. So finding this gold reef can be like looking for a needle in a haystack. And the outback is mostly barren desert and mountains with a total population of only about 700,000 people. And most of those people reside in a handful of towns, leaving the rest of the outback nearly devoid of people. Think about if the western half of the U.S. had only about 700,000 people and most of them were living in a few cities. Think of how desolate the rest of the country would feel. That's the outback in a nutshell, and explains how it can be so difficult to find something out there or relocate something out there. So it seems around 1929 Lasseter finally talked to the government and officials in the government about his find. Maybe he hoped to get some kind of a finder's fee since he was never able to relocate it up to this point. And the government sent a geologist and a commissioner to interview him, but no action was ever taken beyond that by the government. Maybe they weren't convinced. So around 1930, Lasseter talked to the Australian Workers' Union, and it was said that he gave them a few more details than he did to the Aussie government, and it was apparently enough to sell them on the idea of an expedition to go locate the gold. In a short time, they managed to raise a fair amount of funds to put an expedition together and to go look for this lost gold and to prove it was real. The expedition to find Lasseter's Reef consisted of 7 men and included a 6-wheeled truck and a small airplane. So this is 1930. The men consisted of Lasseter, the airplane pilot, the truck driver, a mechanic, a governor general aide, a prospector, and a crew leader. This group left on July 21, 1930. Keep in mind that this is wintertime in Australia, and they likely chose this time due to much better temperatures in the outback. So the expedition seemed doomed from the outset. Lasseter had a hard time giving good directions as they headed towards the outback. His directions were said to be vague, and the crew described him as eccentric, suspicious, and weird. He also didn't seem to be the most cooperative. The plane crashed twice and then was no longer operable, and they had many mechanical problems in the inhospitable environment. Morale was low, and the crew started to doubt that there was even a gold reef to be found. When the group finally reached Mount Lasseter, Lasseter said that they were 150 miles too far north of where they needed to be. The crew had enough at this point. They felt that they were being led on a fool's errand, and the leader called an end to the expedition right then and there. They believed that Lasseter was a scam artist and that they were at the end of their rope at this point and they were not going to play this charade any longer. So the crew parted ways with Lasseter right there and just left him on his own in the middle of the outback. So it seems again that Lasseter was saved by a lucky camel driver. This time it was a man named Paul Johns who was a dingo hunter, and he was out with his camels, and as he was out there, I don't know if he was hunting dingoes at the time or what exactly he was doing, but he came across Lasseter. So Lasseter joined Paul, and before too long, Paul caught on pretty quickly that something was not right with Lasseter. And Paul and Harry Lasseter got into an altercation, and Paul left Lasseter with 2 of his camels, and he abandoned him again alone in the outback for the second time on this expedition. For 16 weeks, Lasseter and the 2 camels made attempts to find the gold reef, but had no success. He eventually ran into a wandering group of Aboriginal natives and spent time with them for a while. But they did not have the rations and resources that Lasseter needed to survive, so Lasseter left them behind. One day while resting, his camels ran off, or likely their ropes had come untied and they escaped, leaving Lasseter stranded in the outback again. At this point, it seemed like his fate was sealed. He had almost no provisions and was now on foot and alone in a vast desert. Soon he was completely emaciated and dying. His body was eventually discovered at a place called Winter's Glen, and his personal belongings, like his diary, were found in a cave at Holes Creek. So his diary was loaded with thoughts and details up until his last hours. His diary showed that he realized no help was coming, and in his weak state, he knew his best chance was to try to walk to Uluru or Ayers Rock, where there would be water and people. Ayers Rock is this massive dome-shaped rock rising out of the desert and sticking out like a sore thumb on the landscape. Many people still hike and camp here today due to access to water and shade and a lot of other reasons. So once Lasseter left the cave to head toward Ayers Rock, he was too weak to make the long trek. It was said that he made it about 30 miles from the cave before he succumbed to his weakened state and died. The Aborigines eventually found him and buried him. His body and grave have since been moved to Alice Springs in the middle of Australia, probably the main city in the outback, or the biggest one. The intriguing thing about this story is that he had a gold-laden sample from his original discovery location, so it seemed to show that he was telling the truth. His diary stated that the gold reef was about 300 miles from Alice Springs and 800 miles from Carnarvon. And Carnarvon is a city on the western coast of Australia. And Alice Springs, like I said, is kind of the main city in the middle of the outback in the middle of Australia. So when you put these distances on a map, it appears there would be a narrow band where the gold reef would lie if the mileages are approximately correct. The diary also says that the gold reef lies next to 3 small mountains that look like 3 women in sunbonnets. The 3 women in sunbonnets are supposed to be to the southeast of the gold discovery location. And also, his diary still exists today, and some letters that he wrote still exist today. So this is not the end. There is a lot more to this story. After his death, some more crazy details emerged. It was discovered that his name was actually Louis Hubert Lasseter, and in 1924, he added Harold Bell to his name and started to go by Harold Bell Lasseter. It's believed that he took the name from Harold Bell Wright and his 1923 book named The Mine with the Iron Door. And the main theme of this book, you might ask? Well, it's about a lost gold mine. Very interesting, right? And this lost gold mine that Harold Bell Wright wrote about is the Lost Iron Door Mine in the Santa Catalina Mountains north of Tucson. So apparently this book may have had an impression on Lasseter, and he took the name Harold Bell. So there was some more research done in recent years, and more details were extracted from Lasseter's diary since he never drew a map. His diary said that a few years after his discovery, around 1924, I believe it was, he went back out to this remote gold discovery location with a surveyor named Joseph Harding. Remember this name as it's important in a little while. So at this point, it seems that he said he was able to find his way back to the gold and did so with this surveyor, Joseph Harding. Maybe the surveyor was able to help him navigate, or he had some additional skills, maybe the surveyor did, and that maybe was more well-suited for the outback, but either way, they supposedly were able to find their way back to the gold. But it's kind of weird that you would not pick up some more gold samples at this time. I know I would pick up some samples of quartz with the densest bands of gold that I could find, and I would definitely be coming back with some more. So if there was as much gold here as he stated there was, then there should have been some big chunks of gold to be broken from the outcroppings to take back and show even more about this location's promise as a gold mine, while getting some more gold to cash in to help fund an expedition and maybe help support your family. If he had one at this point, I guess we don't know at what point he got married and had children. But true to form, as in all of these lost treasure stories and lost gold mine stories, his witness, Joseph Harding, supposedly died before he could help him confirm his gold discovery to the world. Also, there have been some military enlistment documents that have been found that clarify a few more details, but not necessarily in Lasseter's favor. In 1900, Lasseter was in the process of enlisting in the Army, and on that paperwork, he listed that he had just spent the last 4 years in the Royal Navy and had been stationed in England. In other words, he was on a ship in the ocean or in the naval yards in England for all of 1897 when he said he was discovering this gold reef. So Lasseter spent at least a couple more stints, if not more, in the Army in the early 1900s and up until at least World War I, as it seems Lasseter was still in the military during World War I and was also then in the hospital during World War I from maybe a possible war injury, but we don't really know what he was in the hospital for. So remember earlier when I told you to remember the name Joseph Harding, the surveyor that went with Lasseter in 1924? Well, it was discovered that when Lasseter was in the hospital in 1917, so was a man named Joseph Harding. And they were from the same general area in Australia, and they likely became friends while in the hospital. So it seems that Joseph was on his deathbed at this point. So some people believe that Joseph was the actual source of the gold and the story and where the gold sample came from. Many believe that he was the real discoverer of the gold reef, not Lasseter. If so, then he may have tried to pass along the story of where it came from and how to find it, and he may have shared every detail that he could remember, as at this point he may have known that he would never be in a condition to go back out and try to find it again. And if so, Lasseter may have written it all down, but possibly he made some mistakes in writing some things down or interpreting some of these details once he was trying to use the clues on finding this real location. Everyone has used the mileage directions from Alice Springs and the west coast town of Carnarvon, but some believe that that is the wrong Carnarvon. And it is said that hundreds of expeditions have gone out to look for this gold through the years, and they all use directions as stated in the diary from the west coast town of Carnarvon. There is also a Carnarvon on the eastern side of Australia too. And this area even has a Carnarvon National Park, showing this area has probably also been called Carnarvon for quite some time too, as that national park was established in 1932. And since it used the Carnarvon name, that must have been a prevalent name there for quite some time beforehand. Very well could have been in the time of the late 1800s. In other words, some of these new researchers believe that the Lost Gold Reef could be some 300 miles east of Alice Springs, not west. And if this is the correct Carnarvon, then nearly everyone has been looking in the wrong area. And Lasseter could have made the same mistake. And if this is actually what happened, it would explain why he could not give good directions on the expedition, as it would have been a situation of the blind leading the blind. No one had been to this location or had any clue where it was or really how to get to it. Also, if I had discovered gold, I probably would have tried to draw a map early on and not forget waypoints and landmarks and distances and other important details. Maybe this is why Lasseter never drew a map. You can't draw a map of a place that you've never been, and you have no idea what the trip there will look like. The area 300 miles east of Alice Springs has many quartz reefs too, as well as many of them that run for miles and miles. But much of this area is on private land or private ranch land. Not all of these quartz reefs would, of course, contain gold, but one of them might and could contain an awful lot of gold. I've seen pictures of the quartz in every direction in this area, and it's just mind-blowing. So maybe it was Harding that had been there, and Lasseter really didn't know what he was looking for, and he had never been there. This could account for why Lasseter would have to make up a story about riding west on his horse in 1897 and heading to the gold fields hundreds of miles away and discovering this gold along that path. At the age of 17, that would be a heck of a ride for hundreds of miles. That's not likely one that a 17-year-old would probably be up for. Also, in those days, it might not have been as easy as today to access someone's military records and enlistment dates and all of those details that could show if someone was lying many years ago. Lasseter could have met Harding and knew that the gold was out there and hoped that he could find it, and he knew it existed somewhere as he had the proof from Mr. Harding in this gold-rich sample from this friend, and he may have written down all the directions to guide him to it, but that's easier said than done when out in the outback. So we may never know the truth unless someday Lasseter's gold reef is actually found. So I don't know what your thoughts are on this story, but as I gathered more details, to me, it seems like there very well could be a lost gold reef out there, and it can be extremely difficult to find it in the outback. But to me, it seems like Joseph Harding was likely the real person that located this reef, and maybe on his deathbed, he passed along as many details as he possibly could to Lasseter, as they became friends and they were from the same area and a lot of things like that, and he may have felt that he wasn't going to be able to go look anymore. And we've done a lot of other stories on this channel that this type of thing has happened, where someone has spent their life looking for something, trying to relocate it, and when they get to a certain point in their life and they realize I'm never going to find it, and they pick a friend or acquaintance of theirs that they've known for a long time or have a connection with, and they choose to share as many details as they can, whereas maybe earlier in life they wouldn't have shared details or may have led people astray. Once they know that they're never going to find this, they then relay as many of the real details as they can, and he may have also then handed over the gold sample that he had. So if that's the case, then it explains the story away probably to the best of all of the details that we know. It makes everything kind of make sense. And that could be why Lasseter wasn't able to find it. He never had been there, and he followed the lead of all these other researchers that used the wrong Carnarvon, and everything else could be along those lines. And it took someone much later, many years later, to determine, wait a minute, there's two Carnarvons. How do we know for sure which one was being referenced in this story? And so it seems like it very well could be the Carnarvon on the eastern coast that was the one that was being talked about. Maybe Joseph Harding at that point didn't even know about a Carnarvon on the west coast, and maybe it was there, but there obviously was one on the east side too. So that's kind of my thoughts going through all of this. I don't know what your thoughts are. If you have opinions one way or another, definitely leave them in the comments. Let us know what your thoughts are. And thanks for supporting the channel, and thanks for listening to the end.